we're trying something more fun, something new that we haven't done before. We are gonna like kind of bring out our artsy side, I guess. We have our little canvases ready, and with cute bookmarks as well. Yukti's come
Yes.
with her bookmarks, so we're gonna do something fun and creative. Um, do you have an idea of what you're gonna draw? Paint, color?
I think I'm going with the flow, seeing what comes up for me.
Yeah. Okay, I
Yeah.
love it. I do have a image in mind. Let's see how that turns out. Let me just start with like introducing the topic, the question that we're tackling together on this episode. Why is picking a career so hard? Okay. So when I first thought of this, I immediately thought about this one question that you're always asked when we are younger. Always as an uncle or aunt who will say, बड़े होके क्या बनोगे? And and every kid always has a creative answer. So let me hear yours. What would you always say?
Well, I had a different answer every time. Sometimes it'll be a lawyer, a doctor, a journalist also. I think I'd find like the most outside the box career and say them an actor or a dancer.
Mhm.
Like outside the box that time. Now I think it's pretty mainstream.
Yeah.
But after a point, my answer was pretty standard, saying that I'd be a software engineer because that's where my parents wanted me to go. Um, yeah, and I was fairly decent with tech, so I think they had like all that encouragement. Oh, she can figure out a laptop, so she can be a software engineer.
R was a little low. I would say that.
Yeah, it was.
I like that your answer sounds so legit. Like when I was a kid, I had random, of course, like the pilot and all of
Yeah.
those, astronaut at some point. And my favorite one was fashion designing because I would have this like massive folder full
Hmm.
of my like designs, and it was so fun. Like I almost want to restart that. Like it used to be almost therapeutic. So it was great, but I never
Hmm.
obviously followed up on it. So it is what it is. Um, and but it's so interesting to me that like ever since we're younger, it's almost like we're thinking about our career, right? Like it's like what will you do when you're older? And something that I found really interesting was this fun tradition that my Chinese roommate told me about in college. So she was like, when the kid is really young, like when he or she is a baby, there's
Hmm.
like objects kept in front of the baby. So it could be like a pen and paper, it could be an instrument, it could be like paint brushes, and whatever the baby kind of gravitates towards, like crawls towards, kind of indicates what the baby will be when he or she grows up. And I thought that was so cute and so sweet. Um, but it's interesting how different traditions have like different ways of kind of giving importance to career so early on, right? In our lives.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Chinese tradition is also so beautiful. Um, you even when, as a kid, you don't really know what interests you, and you're going towards something like maybe at a subconscious level, you know what would interest you.
Mhm.
Um, but it's funny that how instead of letting a child explore different interests and passions, adults since day one are very concerned about oh, what would they do? Like, what would the career be? I remember this movie actually, Three Idiots, if you've seen it.
Um,
And
I'm so glad you brought it up because we're going to come back to it a little in a little bit. But yeah, go ahead.
yeah, in that scene when the lead actress's elder sister gives birth to the baby boy, and then there's this whole conversation where they don't want to pressure him to be an engineer. And the moment he like kicks, they're like, oh, would you be a footballer? So, the thought, even if it's very latent, is there in everyone. That the
Yeah,
moment you figure out what the kid is good at, what their interests are in, just push them towards that career.
yeah, yeah. That's so true. And even though, yeah, like footballer was more, I guess, creative and slightly unconventional compared to
Hmm.
engineer, it's like the thought, the underlying thought is still there,
Right.
which is pretty crazy. And I'm glad you brought up 3 days because we are going to come back to that in just a bit. So okay, that's
Yeah.
And I mean, as far as your kind of journey goes with psychology, I know you have an interesting way that you kind of came up, came up with the choice. So why don't you just go ahead, tell us like how you chose psychology.
Well, I remember I was in school, and this one night I had a really, really bad nightmare, like terrifying. And I've always been very curious, so I opened Google, and I was like, what makes people dream, and then why are there nightmares, and then why are there good dreams? Like I had so many questions in my mind about dreams, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that there's a whole field dedicated to studying human behavior, human thought, human emotions, like dreams, and so much more than that. So, using whatever limited resources I had as a kid, I'd go to the library and I'd read all of these books that were related to mental health or that were related to psychology. At that time, I think uh, we only had like a lot of self-help books, maybe those how to win people over and make friends. And I was like, I have friends, but the process, the way you're talking about it's really interesting. So I read a lot of those books, and I think that's when I was pretty confident that uh, this is something I want to know more about. Like, this is something I can see myself doing.
I love it. It's like started from a dream, and now here we are. Like it's it's so interesting. And I do remember you mentioning once that your mom at some point wanted you to be a doctor. Is it?
Oh, she wanted me to be an engineer.
Engineer.
So in my sister and I shared the room always, and in front of like our sides of the bed we had these posters, and hers said like, I'm going to score 95% in my 12th and get an admission into medical college, and mine said something along the same lines like, oh, I'm going to get a good percentage in 10th and take non-med and then become an engineer. So that was so funny because a lot of people, like a lot of my friends who were close to me, even my sister, they all knew like a while back that I'd shifted minds and I was going to be a psychologist. So every time we looked at those posters, it was just so funny because we didn't want to break mom's heart just yet,
Yeah.
but we know that was not going to happen.
That's so cute. I like how disciplined, like she's very dedicated to this vision that only she shared and no one else did at that point.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's so interesting, like with parents.
Hmm.
So I was thinking about this. One of my family friends, so auntie and uncle both, they're doctors. And so if you would think about it, it's like you would kind of assume they'd want their kid to be a doctor as well, right?
Right.
But a couple years back, like just before he was going to get into college, auntie and uncle kind of not forced him, but encouraged him to go talk to people outside of the medical community and said,
Oh.
like, hey, why don't you check out like business and economics and other subjects? Because they were like, no, being a doctor is like so exhausting. It's a lot of work. It's like a lot of studying.
Hmm.
But he was so hell bent. It's like he spoke to all of us. Neither of us could influence him at all.
Yeah.
And like to me, what was so interesting is that usually at that stage, right, like when you're so young, you're just about formulating your own opinions and thoughts. And at the same time, you trust your parents for their guidance, and they're kind of like the only experts in your life at that point. It's like it's so hard to go against what they're saying, and doing really what your gut or what your heart says. So I and now he's in medical college. He's super happy. So I'm just like so impressed with how he stuck to his decision, even though like all of us, like I remember telling him like, hey, like check out marketing and finance and stuff. So everyone did try swaying him, but he didn't get swayed, which I thought was so cool. Um, did you, in some way, get any kind of pushback from your parents for psychology? I mean, of course, you were shattering your mom's dream. How did that go?
Not great, I'd say. I think there was a lot of resistance. So I come from a family that has had very traditional career paths. I'd say, a
Mhm.
lot of teachers, um, few engineers, few doctors. So no one's ever really gone out and explored. And when you're the first person to stand up and say, "Oh, I'm gonna take arts," that does like, you know, give a jerk.
Yeah.
But I think that concern has always, it wasn't with what I wanted to do per se, but just in terms of how the career would scope out, like financially, um, in terms of time, and then even with, uh, just the mental and emotional drain that can sometimes come with the field. So those were the things. I think financial being the topmost concern for my family. And they wanted me to do something more conventional. Like my nanu used to say, you argue so well, so become a lawyer.
Fair
So
point.
definitely. And so they just wanted me to still do something I could be passionate about, but at the same time, something that might financially sit a little better. Um, so I remember after 10th, I actually wanted to take up psychology as a subject because a few colleges do require that you study psychology in your school if you want to take it up in college. But my parents were very keen that take commerce. Like, we know you really don't want to take science. So at least if you take commerce, you can become a CA. And I was like, "Oh,
Like a backup is always part of the plan. Yes.
definitely." And I actually studied commerce with maths for an
Hmm.
entire year. And then I finally took my mom to visit this psychologist who I knew through a friend. And I was like, "See, she's earning, she has a successful career, she has her own place, and like, I will not die homeless on the streets if I choose this profession."
Not dramatic at all. Okay, go ahead.
Not at all. I was supposed to be a lawyer, so I was making my point.
Emotional blackmail always works a little like drama, a little spice.
Yeah. So I was like, like maybe we could do this, maybe this will work out. And she was like, fine, like take psychology in your 12th. You can drop maths if you want to. And then you can like maybe see if you want to take psychology up ahead. So I studied commerce with psych, and even after my school finished, even during my undergrad, my mom wasn't very confident. So even my undergrad is a triple major. It's a BA in sociology, economics, and psychology. Yeah.
I have no words. Wait, how does that manage to do three majors at the same time?
So we didn't have like other subjects. We'd only study those three, so it was pretty manageable.
Huh.
But yeah, my mom was like, just study economics, like as a backup. Now that we've pretty much given up on every traditional career, just keep economics in, as a backup, so that
Yeah.
even if psychology fails, or what if you change your mind after you study it, just keep it as a backup.
I feel like do all Indian parents just go to the same school of parenting? Because like my parents had the same line. They were like, "Kuch backup rakh lo." And
Hmm.
even though mine was very conventional, I took economics. But I remember they would always say, "Ki like keep science." मतलब रख लो science क्या जा रहा है? Like just keep it. I'm like,
Yeah.
I need to, it's a lot to digest, especially if you're not interested. So, I mean, it's good to know at least you're in the same boat, as I'm sure many people are. So that's
Yeah.
good to know at least.
I mean, I see a lot of students even now who take like maths as a backup, because in India,
Hmm.
like parents are like, don't leave maths.
Yeah.
Or a lot of people who are actually in the science stream, but you clearly ask them what you want to do, and they're just like, I'm just going to do a BBA, MBA. But my parents were like, science le so that your options stay open.
Correct.
So that thinking, I think, is prevalent even today, like where parents really want you to just have something back up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it still continues. It's like even with my career, if I'm making like a shift in jobs, or it's like, timing things,
Hmm.
even now, it's like my dad's always asking me, "What's your plan B? What's your plan C?" And I'm like, Let me list it out for you." We're always kind of
Yeah.
prepared. Um, yeah. And at some point I thought I wanted to be an engineer, which was crazy. I don't know why I even went in that direction. I would never. But which brings me to one of my favorite clips from Three Idiots. So I'm gonna play that for you now.
Yeah.
इतनी कमाल की फोटो खींची है सर उसने। इसको आप इंजीनियर क्यों बना रहे हैं? इसको तो वाइल्ड लाइफ फोटोग्राफर बनना चाहिए। सुनिए, बहुत आगे बढ़ेगा। हाथ जोड़ के आपसे गुजारिश करता हूँ, मेरे बेटे का फ्यूचर बर्बाद मत कीजिए।
बच्चों खाना लगे आ जाओ।
अच्छा,
Okay, so just that was super quick, super short.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like this movie has so many tidbits of like learning and things that can be discussed.
Hmm.
But I found this part especially interesting because that character, like he's actually really good. Farhan, he's really good at wildlife photography, but he never even had that choice, right? Like from his birth, it was decided he's going to be an engineer.
Hmm.
I feel like even the whole idea of like choosing a career is such a privilege to have. I
True.
think sometimes you don't even realize that, right? Sometimes you might just take it for granted. Um, and something that I find even more interesting is that I feel like we hear a certain thing online, right? There's so much online chatter around finding your passion and finding your like calling and then following that, and that's your career or dream career. And then when you come back at home and it's like, let's say you have a parent like this one that we just watched, who's hell bent on like, nay, you have to do only engineering or only become a doctor. It's like you're kind of stuck in that like kind of crazy world. Um, so you work at a school and you work with a lot of students. Is this something common? Like, do you come across students who face uh, or have faced similar experiences?
Yeah. There are a lot of students, like I remember this one child in particular, his dad was a really, really successful engineer, like at a top post in some big company. And every time, since he was a young kid, whenever you'd ask the child, okay, whatever, what do you want to do? He'd say, oh, I'd be an engineer like my dad. And he actually took up science in his school and he scored really well, like he topped his school and everything. But this one day we were just sitting and talking, and he was like, ma'am, I'm so interested in uh, doing a business, and I just think I'm just going to do engineering and then I'm going to make like some business out of it. Because at this point, it's just really hard to, fight with my dad. And then I met his dad also, and he was like quite a strict and rigid person. And I think this is very prevalent today, like where a lot of kids do something up until 18 or 21 till when they have to, they have to oblige with what their parents say. And then they're like, we find a way to work around it. Or actually, when they come to us for career guidance, we try to find a middle ground or a course which somehow satisfies the parents' need as well, and then the child can also detour, like into what they actually want to do, or at least learn some transferable skills from that course that they can use later. So sometimes that's a real struggle. And uh, you see some kids that are rebellious, that can stand up, that can even rebel against the parents, and they feel like, no, I do whatever I want to do. But more often than not, we do see students who give in to this parental pressure, and then uh, do some course for 3 to 5 years that they have absolutely no interest in. And then we see them as adult clients, who are struggling with life, who are struggling with the course, who are struggling with making friends at internships, at workplace. So it's just like a cycle. Then this one thing triggers so many other things.
Yeah. I think maybe a huge part of it is also this sentiment of I don't want to disappoint my parent.
Hmm.
It's you feel as though again like going back to the same scene, it's like Farhan feels almost indebted to his dad because the previous scene talks about the dad saying I installed this AC for him, this is the only AC in the house just so he can study. It's almost like, oh, if I don't do well in the chosen career, it reflects poorly on my parents, it reflects
Hmm.
poorly on me. But I think a lot of students, and maybe even later in life, like young adults, also live with this fear of disappointment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people pick up safe careers for that reason because
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to disappoint, Like if you know that you have a good intellect and you will get through the course, you
Mm-hmm.
just take it up because you know that it's a fail safe. You'll be doing financially well, you'll have a stable life, you won't have the struggle or the, the yeah, the struggle that comes with a very, very unconventional path, which is what your parents want you to avoid
Mm-hmm.
in the first place, right? So I do think that a lot of people feel that they don't want to disappoint their parents, and at the same time, they also somewhere like that safety net. Yeah,
That they could fall back on. Yeah, that's true.
right.
In fact, so I was reading this book this week, and it's written by the founder of ClassPass.
Hmm.
And in that pile, I mean, now she's this like s- super like awesome, super known founder. But back in
Hmm.
the day, like she talks about when her parents really wanted her to get an MBA. And up until then, she was like really thriving in their like metrics of success. Like she's working at Bain, she'd gotten a great degree from MIT. So she was
Hmm.
like, in that traditional sense of successful, she really was. But she always loved dance, and that's something she wanted to do. And but she always wondered, it's like what would she do with it? It's like would her parents really agree with that? In fact, at one point, which I found so interesting, was that her dad kept telling her, like, do an MBA, are you studying for the GMAT, things like that. And she was not interested at all. And then she put up a dance performance. She created her own troupe, invited her parents, and a huge, like, South Asian community came out for it. And when her dad saw that, he was really impressed. But he still went back and said that, why don't you do like a master's in like arts, like fine arts or something? Like he stuck to his original point of like you education is important,
Hmm.
but he's like, okay, at least do it in a field that's more relevant, that's more interesting to you. I felt like there was such a good common ground almost like from his end. But she, I mean, she didn't go ahead with the masters anyway. She kind of by then had found her voice. But it's just so interesting. It's almost like a universal shared experience that I think almost everyone goes through.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
that's also so common when you come to the teaching field.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk to a few of my colleagues, like
Mm-hmm.
some are there because they wanted to be teachers, of
Hmm.
course. Others, when you talk to them, oh, like, how did you come across a bachelor's in education? And they were like, I was done with my bachelor's, and my parents were just like, why don't you do a B.Ed? Because, like, that's always a good backup option. And this is mostly like in case of females here in India, where the parents are like, you can have a good family life, you can come back on time, raise your kids, everything. So most of them do still give that answer, and this is um, a pretty good school that I'm talking about in a metro city. So it's not like you'd expect these kind of answers here, but you still hear it that, oh, like, I was just sitting at home and I did a B.Ed because my parents wanted me to. And then now, because I couldn't figure out anything else, I'm here. So uh, that still happens, like where people pursue things out of something their parents tell them, and then that becomes their career.
Yeah. This the sheer pressure I think sometimes just gets to most
Yeah.
of us. Do you ever experience with students that they feel like they're kind of getting left behind? Like if let's say the student A who's found her passion, let's say it's dancing, she really wants to do it and she knows that that's like her end
Hmm.
goal and her parents are okay with it as well. Do you think there exists student B and C who are like, oh, I wish I knew what I was going to do in life?
Yeah, yeah. I think there are not just students, there are so many adults as well who are still struggling with what they want to do or where do they see themselves in the long run. Uh, I don't think any of us ever feel completely satisfied with where we are, you always want more.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, yeah, like it does create, I think as an adult, there's a lot of pressure if you're stuck because you see all these people doing so much stuff around you, and then you're just like, oh my God, like, am I too late? Am I too behind in life? But as a child, I think even if, kids don't know, they don't really tend to be very stressed because they know they have a lot of time to figure it out.
Hmm.
And thankfully, in today's time, they also have a lot of resources to figure things out. So, up until some level, I don't think they feel really stressed. Um, but yeah, like I said, that they'll just take a science stream, so that their options stay open if they're not very sure.
Yeah.
Um, so I think knowledge really helps. Like if you tell people that you take maths with art subject, you can still go ahead and do a CA for someone
Mhm.
who doesn't really want to get into the sciences. So giving them the right knowledge, even if they're confused, is really empowering for a lot of students.
That makes sense. That makes so much sense. Okay, so I have been coloring along a little bit,
Yeah.
not so much. I've really not made much progress. I'm just gonna take a quick break, check, and see where you're at. Like, how's it going?
Oh,
Is it
I'm also just right at the starting.
okay, so what I've done is I went on Reddit
Hmm.
and I found a few questions. So I'm gonna read those out to you and let's just see. Let's get your answers, okay? The first one. Is it worth pursuing psychology in India?
It definitely is. First of all, there are so many people, there are
Mm-hmm.
so many cultures, and there are so many problems in a collectivistic culture like ours.
Mm-hmm.
Relationship conflicts, marital, family, these stay at the top. And something that I feel like comes in with our generation specifically is a lot of issues with children. uh, because earlier there was an entire family to raise a child. So what you didn't know, probably some elder knew. Now it's just like a mother and a father, trying to figure things out. And sometimes that gets complicated and that gets rough. So I don't think the scope of psychology has ever been better than today.
Amazing. Okay. And I mean, I know you once mentioned to me, I think about like clinical versus a counseling career path.
Hmm.
So can you just like walk us through a little bit, like even I want to know, like what is the difference? What do the two entail?
Okay. So a clinical psychologist is certified by the Rehabilitation Council of India. You get certified to conduct assessments and team up with a psychiatrist to handle diagnosis. And you are also qualified to take up cases that include psychosis, right? So when you talk about disorders like anxiety or depression, these are more or less neurotic disorders where you might not have a lot of hallucination or delusion or paranoia, right? More at affect level. And then you have disorders that include elements of psychosis. So your schizophrenia, or even sometimes you have anxiety and depression with psychosis, right? So these include elements of hallucinations and delusions and all of those. So these are the disorders that ideally only a clinical psychologist is licensed to handle.
Mhm.
On the other hand, a counseling psychologist does not need a board certification. Just a master's in counseling psychology is good to go. And you can take up cases that only include neurosis, no psychosis.
Okay. Okay. So that's like the key, like what falls under which category?
Right,
That's the main
right.
distinction.
And as a counseling psychologist, you cannot do assessments. Like you're not licensed. Your reports will not be considered for official purposes. Of course, you're taught a few assessments, and there are some screening tools that you could use, but your reports will not have official validity. Like if you want to diagnose a child with a learning disability, or if an individual wants to come under the disability provisions, your report will not be considered official. For that, you need the stamp, sign, and a license number of a clinical psychologist.
Is it possible for someone who's done counseling to get into clinical at
Yes.
some point? Okay.
Yeah. So that's the good thing about the Indian system being a little unstructured right now. Even with a master's in counseling psychology, you can go ahead and do clinical psychology. The requirement to be a clinical psychologist is an MPhil in clinical psychology that gives you the license. Or nowadays, there's also a new degree called PsyD, which is a doctorate in psychology. So that combines PhD and MPhil. So you
Okay.
get a license as well, and then you get a doctor in front of your name.
That's a cool one. That's a cool perk.
Yeah. But I think only two universities all over the country offer it, Amity and Sweeper in Hyderabad.
Okay.
So the options are a little limited in that course.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so you have your MPhil for clinical psychology, and the only requirement for you to get into an MPhil is that you should have a master's in any of the fields that, in any of psychological specialization. So if you have forensic, IO, you can still go ahead and do an MPhil in clinical psychology. So you have that opportunity to switch if you wish to.
So it is possible. It's not that once you've chosen a certain line, you can't
Yeah,
make that turn over. Cool.
it's all right.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. Let's see the next question. Do you regret taking psychology as a career path?
Not at all, surprisingly.
The way you started it, I thought you were going to be like, totally.
No, I think so. I came to this field because of my passion. Like, this is something that I love doing day in and day out. Be it working with kids or adults, I love this field so much that I don't think I can ever regret coming in here. I know a lot of peers who've switched and went into behavioral economics or related fields because they have like better uh, monetary scope also. But I think like if you're just patient enough with this field and if you give it a chance, things can be really, really wonderful because this is a pretty young field right now. So the good thing is that there's a lot that you can experiment. So yeah, it's no regrets.
um, okay, this one's interesting. What are the least stressful jobs in psychology? It's like it's the most convenient question. It's like what's the least stressful? So I guess you can also just talk about like what are the different avenues within psychology.
I have never heard of a job that is not stressful, first of all.
Exactly. Yeah, I was like, I should have just typed that there.
Yeah. Like, this is such a myth, If you ever come across a job that's not stressful, please tell me also.
I mean, I have seen an internship posting for like from a mattress company that wanted interns who could just sleep, like test out the mattress.
Um,
I'm like, that's a good internship. I would love
that's a
that.
dream job, yeah.
Yeah.
But then imagine sleeping when you don't want to, when like you really want to go out with your friends, or when
Yeah.
you really want to watch a show. That,
That's such a good point. Okay, fine. There's okay, there I take that back. There really is no job that's not stressful.
yeah, the pressure to fall asleep. Like I remember seeing this university that was paying you some amount of money for the study, and all you had to do was just like come in and sleep. And
Oh
I
my
was
god.
like, what if I've just woken up and I don't want to sleep? The pressure to sleep is just it's stressful.
Yeah, who knew sleeping could be stressful? Because I just that could be my part-time job if someone would just hire me for it.
Yeah, true. So I think first of all, there's no job that's not stressful. Like I would say that the stress can at times be very unhealthy. That's a red flag in any job, definitely. Uh, but there's always some level of healthy stress that comes along with a profession or a job. And coming to psychology, uh, there are so many setups that want a psychologist on board these days. So you have a clinic setup, which is pretty conventional, and then you have schools. You can work with them as school counselors, and you have colleges. Uh, Career counseling is something that's pretty new and upcoming. You can also have a background in psychology and uh, you know, there are so many career tests like aptitude, intelligence. You can help students figure out a lot of things. That is something that's pretty interesting. Then you have expressive arts therapy. So that's primarily administering intervention using the expressing art modality. That is also something that's beautiful. The only thing is that a lot of clients might not be willing to go that route, so you would have to mix it with traditional counseling, and you'd be good to go, I think. Colleges have guidance counselors and even just like counseling psychologists on board nowadays. Then you have corporate setups. You can work as an industrial organizational psychologist. There's also forensic psychology, but I think the scope in India is pretty much limited to research or professors, like academics in that for now. But that's also something that's super interesting. Abroad, I think you have a lot of scope for it. Like you can team up with the criminal crime investigating bodies and just do even the justice teams and do a lot with that thing. And then there's health psychology. So health psychology, you primarily work in hospitals and your aim is to create an overall healthy life for an individual. So you monitor their physical health, their mental health, just overall everything. And you have your rehabilitation psychology that primarily deals with rehab, so a lot of addiction, and yeah, that comes into play. A lot of disorders like Alzheimer's, dementia, and rehab for them, providing them with a good standard of care and standard of life would also fall under it. So yeah, I think in India these are pretty much the top branches. Oh, this is something new and pretty exciting, I think. It's called a traveling psychologist.
What?
So I've only seen one, like I know her, she's a peer from my college.
Mm-hmm.
And you basically like travel to new cities and new places, and you conduct a lot of workshops, you conduct a lot of wellness based interventions for the community, and you like take sessions online because like you're traveling and all. So the idea is to uh, be a psychologist that travels and provides wellness interventions, which is pretty cool.
So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, for someone who's traveling and just I feel like the digital nomad life is really spread
Yeah.
across.
Yeah.
That's amazing. In fact, I mean, all the different, I guess, opportunities that you said, right? Like the different fields that people can go to, it's so much more vast than I thought it would be. Honestly, I thought
Mm.
they were like, I thought it's still a relatively new field, like you mentioned. It would be like limited opportunities, but yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot. Yeah.
And there are so many good colleges that are offering um, amazing courses like educational psychology, child psychology. There are endless specializations because if you want to work with a particular population in a particular setup, you have to have the right degree.
Yeah.
So that becomes important.
Yeah. Yeah. And for you, I mean, you work with children of all ages, almost
Yeah.
all ages.
Yeah.
What's that been like?
Um, not stressful, I would say. um, I think for me, I love working with kids. Like, I love kids in general. So, from a personal point of view, it's amazing that I get to spend so much time around like midgets and also little older children. But that's like a personal perk I enjoy. Um, Apart from that, I'd say that working with children is something I was hesitant about when I entered the field. Because I wasn't, I mean, it's just such a sensitive population, you know, you need to have the right skills. Uh, and they're so easily influenced. They could just look at you and learn something new. So it's such a uh, high pressure job, I'd say, because you're literally affecting lives, if not changing lives. Um, I think working with schools is a little bit of a struggle because of how the administration is set up, how the management is set up. Schools are really not conducive to having a psychologist in their midst as of now. Um, but I think that uh, there's nothing more rewarding than working with children. Like, you you have an endless stream of clients and their concerns are so varied. Like, no two children will ever have the same problem, you know.
Yeah.
And you get to learn so much. Like, they're so aware today, you know. You tell them, oh, there's this grounding exercise you can do. Mom, you know, I actually already looked it up on Google and I've been trying it and it doesn't really work out. So you're constantly challenged to uh, go beyond the standard textbooks,
Mm.
do a lot of research, take up a lot of new courses, learn a lot of new skills, because whatever is traditional, these kids already know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one thing, that it's a pretty challenging environment, very rewarding, very fulfilling, though. Also, I would say a little, sometimes it can get a little too much because seeing such young people go through a lot of stuff is not easy to process always.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be a struggle with the management. So that sometimes gets a little hard to get through. But overall, I'd say it's pretty good.
So, I mean, it brings me to my final question. I want to know what's next for you. Like, what's exciting for you? Is there something that you're like currently working on, or is there like a particular short-term goal? Anything that's exciting you at this point?
Something that's really exciting for me at this point is that I'm trying to set up my own practice.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
trying trying to bring the keyword, yeah. So I'm in the midst of doing the branding bit of it, like figuring
Mhm.
out the logo, figuring out the name and everything.
The most fun part.
Yeah. Also, the most confusing part is creative decisions are so like tough to make, and you just want it to be perfect because you're like, like ideally, I never want to change this. Like, this is my baby. I can't change its name. I can't change its face now. But yeah, so I think that's something that I'm really looking forward to in terms of my career, which is coming up with my own setup.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's like a short term thing that I'm looking forward to.
That's so exciting, and I just feel like the start of something new. It's just like you're so powered by so many interesting emotions, right? I think
Yeah.
sometimes you're just like, I'm gonna kill it, and sometimes you're like doubting yourself, and I'm sure it's just like a mix of all
Yeah.
of that. So I mean, I'm just so excited that you've started on this journey of literally doing something all by yourself. So that's amazing, and it's so good to hear as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, my painting, coloring, drawing, whatever's not done yet. So I'm gonna
Same.
devote just a couple more minutes.
Yeah. Oh, I
That,
love it.
oh my god, get it more on screen. Stop. That's so cute. Wait, is that a girl?
Yeah.
In like a little like a
Suppose.
lake. In like a lake
Yeah.
oh my god. I would love to be that. That's so pretty. Okay, you
Yeah.
did it relatively quickly. I'm very impressed.
Because it's a shorter surface area to work with. But yeah.
That was so good. I'm really impressed.
Yeah, this is the girl looking towards a bright future.
Unit thought also. I love that. Very well
Yeah.
thought out.
Thanks.
This was fun.
Yeah.
I'm gonna practice my coloring skills a little bit more. I'm gonna put these crayons to some use. But thank you so much for being on the episode. I'm so glad we could have some fun and have some good conversation too.